Did you know that 1 in 10 women in the workplace leave their jobs due to menopause related symptoms? And that actually costs the UK economy £1.5 billion yearly. The government finally says it's stepping up, and by 2027, large employers or companies employing over 250 staff will need to publish something called menopause action plans. This is a huge step in the right direction, and I'm going to break it down, the pros, the cons, the things that we ought to be aware of that may not be obvious when the government and various bodies are jumping around about how excited they are for menopausal women, because sometimes it might just be a big, bright, shiny badge and not a lot actually comes from it. So I'm going to break it down in today's episode. So welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kate. I share a weekly video with you every Monday around something related to menopause. And I rarely talk about the workplace purely because there's so much lacking in the workplace for menopausal women. And this new legislation that's coming out, which will be mandatory for companies that employ over 250 staff as of 2027. It is optional for smaller companies, but of course, they are recommended to jump onto this accreditation. And I mean, it just makes good common sense. Half of the workforce is women, and any adult woman is going to be going through the menopause at some point in time. In this menopause action plan, they're going to be going over work-related issues, possibly uniform changes for women, how to make the workplace more flexible and adaptable for a woman who's struggling with serious menopausal symptoms. Could also mean training managers, because a lot of people have absolutely no idea what is the menopause. As a man, it's very hard unless you've experienced it with somebody in your family going through the menopause. And often I feel women feel overlooked, and they also don't want to create a fuss. When you're in a bad mood or you're feeling emotional, the last thing you want to have to do is try and explain to somebody why you're feeling like that, because you just don't have it in you. You just don't have that energy or even the motivation or enthusiasm to do that. So, given the hopefully what will be improved education for everyone in the workforce, men, women, managers included, it's going to help to break that stigma that still surrounds the menopause, still surrounds menstruation, still surrounds women's things, and it's going to help to make it a much more open discussion. Plus, these employers hopefully will be legally accountable to making sure that these various changes are implemented as of April 2027. So why is this so important? Around about 10% of women have resigned because of their menopause symptoms. Half of them are taking time off, and the vast majority are just trying to battle it out at their desk, managing the sweaty phases, going through the hot flushes, feeling pretty vile, dealing with the insomnia and also the brain fog that can be one of the major symptoms of menopause. It's something called presenteeism, and essentially it's when you are present, you're at your desk doing your job, but you're unable to do it to the best of your ability. And that has many impacts. Obviously, it reduces productivity at work, but it also nibbles away at your sense of self, and your self-confidence, your self-esteem. You start to second guess yourself, and then the more stressed you become around not being able to perform at such a snappy way. I mean, I know when I was younger and I was managing an office with a heck of a lot of people, it was huge, and I knew exactly what I was doing. I was on the ball, and if I'd had to do that through brain fog and trying to navigate an early perimenopause, I think it would have been nigh on impossible to have done that job. Also, half of the problem is that still a lot of women, particularly if you go through perimenopause younger, you're still not often acknowledge that it is perimenopause. And so you're dealing with all these symptoms, these side issues that might be affecting you personally, and obviously having a negative impact on how you show up at the workplace. But because there's no system in place to support you there, you feel very isolated. And I think that is one of the main reasons why so many women resign, because they just cannot see a way forward that benefits themselves and also helps them stay productive and feel supported and understood in the workplace. Oh, I had to strip off. I'm absolutely cooked. That jumper's so warm. Research by the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development found that 67% of working women between the ages of 40 and 60 have experienced severe menopausal, significant menopausal symptoms at work. 79% said they were less able to concentrate, 68% said they experienced more stress, 49% said they felt less patient with colleagues, clients, and the workforce in general, and including themselves. And 46% felt less physically able to carry out their tasks at work. By the way, I've added a load of research links down below beneath the description of this video. So if you want to dive into them further, I highly suggest you do. Some of the articles are really, really interesting. Menopause is now being recognised as a disability in some cases under the Equality Act. That means if your symptoms are negatively impacting you day on day and it's having quite a serious negative impact, your employer is legally bound to support you. Now, I think this is huge progress, but I also think it raises really big, important questions that we, I guess, with time are going to see how this evolves. Firstly, the term disability can make it feel uncomfortable. Many people associate the term of disability as less than or not quite normal, and that is far from the truth for most menopausal women. You know, menopause is a natural life stage. We're all lucky enough to live that long. We're all going to go through menopause in one way, shape, or form. It's not a medical illness, although it is medicalized hugely, nor is it a lifelong impairment. And I think that labeling it as a disability can seem reductive. I think some women might feel that they're being positioned as fragile and the little woman, rather than being recognized as a resilient adult navigating a hormonal transition in her life. The thing is, calling it a disability actually gives you legal leverage. It's practical protection as far as I can understand it, that without this classification, employers might be able to sidestep the issues. Whereas if it's a legal classification out of a disability, then they have a standard of care, of duty to make sure that you feel supported and empowered to fulfill your work role in as far as you can possibly manage to fulfill it in a reasonable way. So it's a legal mechanism, not a value judgment. It doesn't define the woman herself. It just recognizes the day-to-day impact that menopause can have on women in the workplace. But it's about biology colliding with workplace culture and, I suppose, the rather reductive labeling that has to be given out in order to afford legal protection to women struggling with severe menopausal symptoms in the workplace. And let's be honest, you know, we already make allowances for other people at work. You know, smokers, they're allowed to go and take their cigarette breaks. That is not a legal protection for them. It's just something that employers accept as normal. So if they're allowed to step out for their multiple cigarette breaks a day, why is a menopausal woman not allowed to step out because she needs just to get some fresh air, because she's experiencing a hot flush, she feels particularly stressed and she just needs 5 minutes to herself? You know, all these things will positively impact a woman struggling with menopausal symptoms because they're real. You know, especially if you're not entirely understanding what is at the root cause of a lot of these menopausal symptoms. And to be quite honest, a lot of them, the scientific community aren't exactly sure either. I know stress is highly linked to hot flushes, but of course, if you're sitting there dripped in sweat, you're going to be feeling even more stressed. So it's going to have this vicious cycle of feeding itself. So you're more stressed, so you have more sweaty moments, you're more stressed, you have more sweaty moments, you go home, you can't sleep properly because not only are you waking up with night sweats, but you're concerned about how your sweats are impacting your workplace. You may be in the middle of an important meeting and you get these sweats coming on. You've got the brain fog. You might have to stand up in meetings and talk to a large body of people. Well, if you've got the brain fog, you know, you're worrying about what you're going to be saying, which is going to make you more stressed, which is going to make you have even worse brain fog, and then the hot flushes. So it is all interlinked, and to have an open policy of acceptance and not to be, oh, the menopause. Don't know what to say about the menopause. You know, there's a lot of men who, even when I'm talking to them, you know, I mention the word menopause. Menopause is my life. I talk about menopause pretty much every single day of my life. I'm researching it all the time. I'm learning even more about it all the time. And so for me, it's absolutely normal. But there are so many men that I talk to, and it's just like, oh, menopause. There's the stigma out there, and you can see it in people's body languages, or even the fact that, oh, I don't want to talk about that. And it's like, well, why not? It happens to half of the population. Why are we not having these open conversations? There is nothing to be embarrassed about. It's just a natural phase of life. And so by bringing it as part of the conversation within the workplace is going to have such a beneficial impact on not only the women, but also the men, because they're going to understand more about it. It's going to help them in their significant relationships to be able to understand a woman more profoundly is going to make them just feel more comfortable around us. So I think it's really good that we're having these conversations. However, I do think there are a few things that employers and us as people that work hard and try hard and have, high standards and decent morals. When I read about this, my first thought was, well, what about those women who are going to abuse it? Because there's always the ones that say, oh, but this is why I have this problem. This is why I have to take these drugs. And a lot of it comes down to people not really giving their full effort at work. It's a very it's a very fragile line, and it's not an easily enforceable one, because if you have the employee who turns up and they're shoddy and they're slapdash and you've got a bit of a question mark over them already, and then all of a sudden they go through menopause and so they don't come in for a week because they just feel wretched. How does you cannot be productive at work. You cannot run a successful business if you've got people like that abusing it. And people will abuse these situations. And I think as an employer, that is one of the things I would be very concerned about, is how actually can it be implemented, and how do they understand that somebody isn't just trying to get a few days off extra. Yeah, they might not feel their best, but I mean, come on, when you work, how often do you actually go in feeling like 100% in any case? It's having that distinction between people who work hard, women who work hard and are really proud of their job and they give their best, but because of menopausal symptoms, they're not able to function 100%, versus those women who are thinking, this gives me an extra card to play. I don't really feel like going in today. I am quite tired, so I'm just going to blame it on the menopause. How do they make that distinction? And I think that is going to be a major hurdle as this law comes into effect. I also think there's the risk of hiring bias in the future. So, as this law comes into effect, if you've got say a 38-year-old man and a 38-year-old woman, they both equally fabulous at doing the job. They've both got the same qualifications. They've both got the same types of characteristics and personalities. They both do the job well. Does the employer choose the man because he's not going to go through the menopause, versus the woman? And I think, again, this could be something, we know discrimination exists. This could be an added burden that might not weigh in the woman's favor, because how does the employer know how you're going to navigate the menopause when it happens? And also, how does the employer know that you're not going to abuse it if and when you get hit by these symptoms? Because ultimately, the business has to succeed. And we are all little cogs in a wheel when we work for a big corporation. So the big corporation is not going to want to run the risk of reducing its productivity by taking on women who may be seen as a higher risk, but of course that is discriminatory. So in practical terms, how is this going to have an impact on women in the workforce as time goes on? And the other thing to consider is menowashing. So you may have heard of greenwashing. So it's when a company may get a label to say they're eco-friendly or they're planet-friendly, but in actual fact, they're not really doing an awful lot. They've managed to get the label somehow, but their products have still got things in them that are harmful to waterways or, whatever it might be. With menowashing, it could be the same thing. So they manage to tick the boxes. They say, yes, I'm going to do this. We're going to confirm we're going to do this. Yes, we're legally binding. They have the big accreditation sign on their website. You go for your job interview and, oh, yes, we've got all these structures in place to help menopausal women. But once you're there, do you actually get the benefit of those structures? Is it just piecemeal? Yes, we've got it. We're going to do it. Here's our badge. But then actually nothing really happens or changes within the workplace. How many times do we hear, when we're coming up to a general election and they're making all these promises And then the party gets elected and, oh, but I thought, so you said you were going to eradicate this by such and such a date, and it's actually got worse in the meantime. So this, I think, again, is another real issue that we need to be considering. What could it look like in reality? Well, I think it could be, if I was an HR representative supporting menopausal women in the workplace, I would be offering women to sit near an open window. I would be offering women to have fans on their desks or sit near an air conditioning unit if that's what they prefer. I would be offering for them to be able to take occasional breaks where it's not questioned, but they're allowed to go off for 5, 6, 7 minutes like smokers do and just get a breath of fresh air if they can feel a hot flush coming on. I'd make sure there was easy access to toilets, possibly even having a shower for each floor of the corporation, access to cold free water, possibility where they can work from home and have that sort of flexibility built in. I think this really depends on the corporation because sometimes it's impossible. And I think since COVID, they've realized, across the board that productivity has fallen because while it's lovely to be able to work from home and you fit your work around the family life, etc., you are probably not as productive at home as you are in an office. And I know there's going to be the odd anomaly around that, but the figures show that productivity has declined since COVID, and the flexible work arrangements where people are still working from home and they've not gone back into the office are having a negative impact on productivity. And at the end of the day, these businesses are there to be productive, they're there to be profitable. And if you're the one at the top running that business, it's really important that you feel secure also that the employers are being well cared for, but also that you've got that productivity being carried through so that the business isn't put at risk by these various aspects of legislation. It's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because for the individual, that individual needs to be protected, but also the whole company ethos, the whole company success needs to be protected. And yeah, it's not going to be down to just whether a woman is menopausal or not. Of course, there are very many issues that come up, and there are always people that are going to get away with the bare minimum of work just so they don't get fired. And there's also a lot of employers out there who'll pay you just enough so you don't leave. I think that whole philosophy just sucks. And I wish we could move away from it, where employers really cherish their workforce, they look after them, they pay them well for the amount of work that they do, but also that employees do their end of the bargain as well, and they show up for work and they do their best, and they probably do a little bit more than their best, and they have a sense of pride over whatever job it is that they do. And I think if we could all revert to more that side of philosophy of working, we would be so much more productive in this country and happier. I'd also change that all managers have training around the menopause, because I think it's really important that they understand how it can impact a woman's life and what to look out for, so that they understand it, they're not embarrassed by it, but they can also support it and maybe see, if somebody's in the middle of a hot flush, it's fairly obvious what's going on, and just maybe just say, yeah, if you want to step outside for a few minutes, just don't worry, we can delay the meeting for 5, 10 minutes. You go and sort yourself out, or you go and freshen up, or whatever it might be. I think to have that clarity and understanding for every level within the workforce would make such a huge difference, because you would feel supported. You wouldn't feel like you're being a pain. You wouldn't feel like your job's at risk because of the physical symptoms that you're getting because of menopause. And also have menopause champions. So you have various men and women around the workforce that are there to help support you, and maybe have a support group, maybe a weekly support group, where if you're menopausal or you work closely with somebody who's going through the menopause, you can all show up. It can be an informal discussion, maybe learning a little bit more about the intricacies of menopause, but so that you feel included and that it's not just, oh, it's just me going through the menopause. I think it'd be so important that you have that feeling of inclusion, not exclusion. That lifts it from HR policy as a paragraph of their, operations manual to, okay, we actually are taking regular action. We're really on the ball with our menopause support. If you join us, we'd love you to join us. This is how we can support you. This is what you get. And if there's anything else that you feel would contribute to your experience of working here through the menopause, we'd love to hear your suggestions. Something like that, so that everybody feels part and parcel of that conversation. So where does that leave us? I think it's really good progress, but I think it's also got a lot of potential flaws. It's putting menopause on the map in a way that we've never seen it before. I mean, it's going to be legally binding as of April 2027 for companies that employ over 250 people, and it's being highly recommended that smaller employers also do the same. I think the real test isn't whether employers put these action plans into place, is whether they actually enforce them and live by them, whether they move beyond box ticking and actually create cultures where women feel really supported and safe. Because a fan on a desk helps, but it's the culture of that workplace that will keep the woman at work there. So I'd love to hear from you. If you could change one thing, you had a magic wand and you could make one thing change in your workplace or where you've worked before in the past, what would that be? Would you please drop it in the comments below? It might be a fan, it might be flexible hours, it might be just having a support group or a boss that understands and really gets you. And if you found this helpful, hit the subscribe button. You can click the bell icon so that you don't miss future episodes. It'll just pop up and it'll let you know that there's a new episode released. They're released every Monday at 10 a.m. UK time. In menopause affects us all if we're lucky enough to get this long. And if you're in the workplace, menopause should not be a reason that you end up walking away from possibly a job or a career that you love. So I hope you found this helpful. Thank you so much for your company, and I will look forward to chatting with you again next week.